Um, Thank you so much for the warm introduction, and thank you for all of you and also the people online for joining this talk. Buckle up, because we're going to spend the next 30 minutes speaking about octopus farming and why this is such a terrible idea. So before diving into the presentation, I just want to spend a minute just sharing with you how I came across this practice. So about 1 year ago, I joined Aquatic Life Institute, and my colleagues were exploring this topic because a new farm was supposed to open this year, actually around August, on octopus farming in Spain in the Gran Canary Islands. Now, we started sort of investigating the different concerns surrounding the practice, and as being a newbie to the aquatic animal space, I just started doing some research online. This is one of the first pictures that I found that really captured my attention. It's not really the picture itself, actually, but it's the caption that got my attention, which says, "Octopus raised in captivity, like this one, could save their wild relatives from overfishing." Now, as an hardcore vegan, it's very hard for me to see farming as something positive. As an activist, though, I feel that it's sort of my duty to challenge what could be my own assumptions. So we spent a lot of time really investigating and researching if this claim from the industry was true. And I'm standing here in front of you today, after almost 1 year, advocating for a ban on octopus farming, to really share with you why this is a symbol of what humans shouldn't be doing. This was actually the title of an article that came out in The Guardian just a few months ago, and I think it perfectly encapsulates the issues that we see with octopus farming. Just a brief overview of what I would like to go through today with you. Obviously, the main concerns, as I always say, welfare concerns are almost one, I don't want to say tiny aspect, but it's one aspect of the problem. So I really want to try to give you an overview of everything that concerns octopus farming. I want to also dive a little bit more into the logic that the industry is trying to sell by claiming that this is a sustainable practice. And we're going to look at some videos and photos. I should say that some might be disturbing. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've all seen worse. And I also want to leave you with some efforts that are being done on the global scale, as well with some concrete actions that you can engage with after we finish talking about it. So very briefly about Aquatic Life Institute. For those of you who don't know us, we were founded in 2019 to address the gap in the global animal rights movement about aquatic animals. Our mission is to reduce the suffering of the trillions of aquatic animals which are either commercially caught at sea or raised in aquaculture facilities. Our three main pillars of work are coalition building, policy change, and research. As you can see, these are all based on scientific evidence, which dictates everything we do. We align with the core principles of effective altruism, and we run several coalitions. I put here the Aquatic Animal Alliance, because many NGOs actually here at CARE are part of that alliance, and also the Aquatic Animal Policy Focus Group, which is a group that I relaunched, let's say, at the beginning of this year, which consists of experts and people interested in policy opportunities for aquatic animals on a global scale. Here in the pictures, you can see some of my amazing colleagues. Some of you might have met them at AVA. So why are we here today talking about this terrible, terrible idea? So we're here because in this past few years, the consumer appetite for what is usually referred to as exotic and fancy meat really grew massively, and octopus is one of these animals. Obviously, so far, octopus farming doesn't exist. So what humans did to sort of fill this demand was to overfish the ocean, basically, from these animals. Now, instead of seeing this as a concern, the industry saw this as a great opportunity, right, to fill in the supply gap and sort of balance the demand and offer. The reason, though, we've seen one of the claims that I showed you in the first picture, let's stop overfishing by farming them. Actually, we know that the main reason for the industry to do that is profit, right? These animals have very high value, are very high value on the marketplace, and hence we believe this is the main reason for them to be interested in this species. I also wanted to share with you some sort of places where actual attempts have been carried out of breeding them, although we approach this as a global issue. So in Spain, some of you might have heard what's happening in the Canary Island, where the first farm was supposed to be established, as I mentioned already, this year. In Mexico, there is a research facility, which is actually, it's a farm masquerading as a research facility, where they are already selling, we believe not very legally, octopuses to the surrounding restaurants. In the US, some of you might have seen what's happened in the Hawaii, where there was basically a petting zoo for octopuses, and we'll see some videos about it later. And we also know that in Japan, they're trying to close the breeding cycle in captivity, which is very, very hard to do with octopuses. So if you could take out your phones and just very briefly scan the QR code there. I'm not very good with tech, but this should work. So if you could answer this question, which is, should octopuses be acceptable as food like other intelligent animals as pigs, or should they be off limits? The reason why I'm asking you this question is because I asked myself this question when I started advocating for a ban on octopus farming, because for those of you who know me, I'm a huge pig fan, pig lover, let's say. So why would I be willing to sit down with pork producer talking about improving welfare standards for pigs, but I'm absolutely not willing to do that with octopuses? To date, this is a practice that we should say no to. So while you guys answer, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler of my presentation. But the main reason why, actually, we as Aquatic Life Institute decide to take a full abolitionist stance, which is a very rare thing for us to do, is because we simply do not need, in 2023, to insert a new carnivorous animal in our food systems. So we're working very hard, right, to try and shape it in a way that is sustainable, and it doesn't rely on animal protein so much. And yet, this is what we plan to do. So I just want to check the answers. I see we all align. Well, as I mentioned before, I understand that it's important to sit down and talk to pork producers about improving welfare standards. The main reason is because, unfortunately, that industry already exists. Octopus farming doesn't exist yet. So we actually have the possibility of preventing advocates in the future to sit down with octopus producers trying to improve their standards. So I mentioned that welfare concerns are one aspect, but obviously they're pretty big and present. To assess the welfare concerns of octopus farming, I will use the 5 pillars of welfare, which is what we use as Aquatic Life Institute when we try to assess aquatic animal welfare, which you will see it's quite complicated to do. So when it comes to environmental enrichment, octopuses are very, very intelligent and complex beings. I'm sure you've seen some videos of what they can do. So imagine providing that type of enrichment in a factory farm, right? That's basically not possible, as we've seen from other species. So this would just result in chronic boredom and chronic mental stress for these animals, very far from positive and high welfare farming. Feed composition, I briefly mentioned that octopus is a carnivorous species. So this simply means that they need to eat other animals in order to thrive. We'll talk more about this later in the slide, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. When it comes to stocking density, you have to know that octopuses are actually solitary animals. So they don't live in groups. They don't socialize. They really don't like that. Think about intensive farming. When have we seen animals not being crammed in very crowded conditions? So this is what is expecting these animals, and it's absolutely very from their welfare. When it comes to water quality, actually, octopuses are very peculiar. So they lack an internal and an external skeleton. So their skin is really fragile, and any change in water quality and external temperature could really affect their well-being. Last but not least, stunning and slaughter. To date, a humane slaughter method to slaughter octopus does not exist. So we know that what these people in research facilities have been using is the method of ice slurry, which is a horrible method. And actually, even the EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, suggested to remove ice slurry from aquaculture as a slaughter method. And basically, they discovered that octopuses are not even, they're basically paralyzed, but they're not stunned. So basically, they die very slowly in a painful death. So how is this a good idea, right, when you try and address good welfare? let's have a look a little bit of the environmental concerns surrounding this farming. If you think in general of how intensive farming, what the effect of intensive farming have been on the wild populations, right? In general, not just about octopuses. Think of the pathogens that get spread from farmed animals to wild counterparts. This could be done even through predators, that get into a farm and get a fish, and then the predators go back into the ecosystem. Think of the competition that is created from the needs of these farmed animals and their wild counterparts. And I don't even want to get into the genetic abnormalities. I'm sure you've seen some very weird and disturbing images of what an interaction from a farmed animal to their wild counterpart could create. So if we think of all of this and we look it through octopus farming, this actually creates a big concern because octopuses are known to be masters of escapes. So the possibility of them escaping the facility, I would actually say it's pretty high. And the impact that these farmed animals would have on their ecosystem and their wild relatives is absolutely not known. So we have no idea what could come from a farm. And even if you want to take the animal out of the picture, right, let's just look at the environment. Even if you build a facility on land, right, so the risks, although I say are less, but still present, of an octopus escaping, think of all the effluents that you need to produce to sustain that farm. This effluent will be released into the surrounding ecosystem. So it's basically you're creating more waste that will pollute the external environment. I also want to touch a little bit on the public health concerns because we just came out of a pandemic. So I would think that humans would be more mindful when thinking what to do next, especially to other species. Well, actually, the immune system of octopuses is still really little known to date. We know they're very smart, but we don't know how they function. So the fact that they could be potential vectors of multiple unknown pathogens is actually very, very high. And what really bugs me about the industry, there is no planning, no prevention strategy, no treatment strategy. And the phrase that you see right there, which says, the use of antibiotics is not contemplated for any of the stages of the productive process of octopus farming, is a phrase that we found from one of these facilities when they were submitting papers to get a permit to build this farm. Translated, this means that a producer said that he's not going to use any antibiotics because octopus won't get sick. Right? That sounds a little bit of a naive thought coming from a producer, especially if you think of farming in general, or maybe a little bit untruthful, I would say. And actually, I can say till now that it's also wrong. So the ugly photo that you see there is a deceased octopus, and what you're seeing is actually a skin lesion. So this photo comes from the Handbook of Pathogens in Cephalopods, which is a scientific book, I guess I can say, that we stumbled upon this year when we were publishing, putting together a report regarding all the public health concerns surrounding this practice. Now, what strikes me is that in this book you can find like 200 bacteria or disease, which are also zoonotic disease, which means that can pass from animal to animal or to animal to human. And this book has never been quoted by these farms who have been researching how to breed this animal for the past 10 or 15 years. So I wonder, did you seriously not come across this, or do you just not care? I think it's the second. I have another question for you. It's the last one, because I'm not very technological. So if you could please take your phone again and answer this question. If you don't know the answer, guess it. Because, the point is not really here to just to test you on the knowledge, but this will help me sort of move into the second part of the presentation. Okay, let me see when we have a little bit more answers. The question is, what do species like salmon, shrimp, and tuna eat? Let's see what you guys answered so far. Okay. So the correct answer is other fish. Sorry for being mean in this question. The only point I wanted to make is that salmon, shrimp, tuna, they are carnivorous species. And yet, you probably know, they are the ones that humans farm the most. Now, why did I ask you this question? Octopus is a carnivorous species. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this slide because I don't know about you, but I hear the word sustainable at least 20 times a day. for no reason, right? So the fact that the industry is claiming that octopus farming is a sustainable practice doesn't really convince me. So let's have a look at it. Aquaculture has been presented as the solution to overfishing and food security. Let's have a look at sustainable octopus farming, right? Overfishing. I just said that octopus is a carnivorous species. So in order to feed him, you need to catch other fish, give it to the octopus, and then give the octopus to humans. So the fact that, obviously the welfare concerns of these animals being used as feed is never taken into consideration in aquaculture, just a disclaimer. But the fact that in order to solve overfishing, you want to go and fish more in the ocean doesn't really sound like a very logical or smart thing to do from a pure logical perspective. And if we look at food security, I want to step back from, let's say, a vegan perspective, right? Again, let's just look this from a logical point of view. If you take the carnivorous animal out of the picture, so let's take, for example, salmon. I don't know if you know, but to take a salmon to harvesting weight, you need to feed him 120 anchovies, right? Which, obviously, no welfare concerns there. If you take the salmon out of the picture, and you have humans eating directly what the salmon is eating, from a pure logical point of view, that's already more sustainable and more efficient in terms of food security. I want to take it a little bit step further. Even if you take anchovies out of the water and you have humans eat plants directly, that could be even a better way to address food security. What I also wanted to point out here is one thing that Dr. Jennifer Jacket, which in my opinion is one of the most expert scientists in the space about octopus farming, she said this in an interview with Sentinel Media. She said that octopus meat will be consumed and not eaten. And I love this distinction because it made me reflect. That's right. Octopus meat is being, the demand is in high-income places like Europe and the US. This product will just be a choice that you give to people. This is not, in other words, it's not going to feed the hungry world, right? So this claim of it being like the solution to food security really gets me thinking. And I wanted to share with you here something that we found in an investigation we released in a Mexico research facility, which is technically a farm, where they are already selling baby octopuses to high-end restaurants and retailers around the area because they are considered a delicacy. So this is a luxurious product, or what they want it to become. I also want to touch a little bit on the economic viability of octopus farming, because when I learned that this practice was really heavily subsidized by government money, I was really upset because I couldn't figure out why would you support such an unsustainable practice. Well, if you think of the first photo that I showed you, the caption, right? Oh, this farming is going to save wild octopuses. That's how the industry is selling this. They're selling this as a conservational effort for wild species. And actually, the UNEP, which is the United Nations Environmental Program, gave money to this facility to address this. So we've just seen that actually the potential negative impacts that farmed octopuses could have on their wild relatives is actually much higher than the potential positive impacts. And if we see what's already out there, right? I don't know always going to get back to salmon, but I think we already have a very good example of what is not working, right? So if you think of the global production of farmed aquatic animals, like, again, salmon, has that displaced the need to catch animals in the wild? Absolutely not. So this is actually empirically wrong. So this is not how it's going to go. It's going to go in the direct opposite direction. And another claim that the industry make is that octopus farming is going to create jobs and boost economic growth and all of this. So again, let's have a look at what's happening in this Mexico farm research facility. The local fishermen who used to rely on wild octopuses, to fish and to make a living out of it, are now struggling. Because this research facility, I mentioned already that closing the breeding cycle of the octopus it's very difficult. I don't want to get into details, but trust me on that. Like breeding an octopus, it's very, very hard because they're not suited to being farmed. So this facility is actually catching pregnant females out of the ocean, taking them inside, taking the eggs into an incubator, and then farming these animals. So basically, they are already overfishing the wild populations in order to replenish their brood stock. So this gets me thinking, how does this support a local fisherman, from a local coastal community, which simply will find less animal to catch in the wild? So again, this economic sustainability of octopus farming, again, raises several concerns to me. Okay, we're gonna go into the fun part now. So I will show you some images, and I mentioned before I'm a huge pig lover, so you will see some pigs as well here. But I'm trying, what I would like to really, for us to think about it, and I put myself in the mix, we're not talking about the picture here on the right. We're not talking about a wild, beautiful animal in his natural habitat taken and addressing the problem from there. We're talking about taking that animal and putting it in a barren tank. That's what we're planning to do to octopuses. Now, the photos and videos you will see are from Laura Lee Cascada from the We Animals media, and I think hopefully you will understand the type of analogy that I'm trying to make. So some of you might be familiar with this. This is a building in China, the one on the right, where it's filled with pigs. I don't even want to go into the concerns that we see, in this picture or what this could cause. But this building is filled with crates with pigs. I believe the claim was not to have environmental impacts or something like that. This just got me thinking, and I'm showing you this really to reflect on this together. Humans like pigs. We know that they're fun, they're intelligent, like people like to interact with them. Yet, it's socially acceptable to farm them. This is socially acceptable, to put them in crates in a building. So it got me thinking. People like octopuses. People think octopuses are smart. What would prevent us from, putting that animal instead of the cages, imagine like a lot of tanks in a building? That's the future. That's what octopus farming will look like, right? Just picture these animals in tanks instead of the crates. I've taken this a little bit farther, so bear with me. Maybe if I can make the presentation go? Yes. So these photos that you see here, maybe you might be less familiar with this. This is another building in China, which is called the Pig Hotel. The room that you see there is a room that you can rent. I think it's like $1,600 a night. You can sleep there and get a good view of pig pens. Now, don't ask me why people would actually want to engage in such an activity, but I think as activists, we need to acknowledge that people think this is fun, that this is a luxurious thing, right? That it's a fancy thing you take your partner after an engagement date or something like that. So again, it got me thinking. And I want to show you some videos here, again, from the Hawaiian petting zoo. Have a look at how people interact with these animals. Right? So you can see, there's obviously no concern about having them in these barren tanks. It's actually, giving them toys. It's fun, they're cute. This worries me. The fact that people do not associate this with suffering, or the potential outcomes that this could lead to really, really worries me. And I think we need to make an effort. And I always try to picture this image in my head, right? As a potential next step of octopus farming, what could we do? Could we build an octopus hotel? I don't see, what would prevent humans from doing that. Imagine people getting up, and having, an aquarium with octopus going up and down, and then you get to choose which one you eat for dinner. That seriously concerns me. And that's why I get so fired up every time I talk about this topic, because we have to show people that this is wrong, that this is not fun to play with an animal and give it toys. That's not what we should be doing to an animal that is so intelligent, so smart, and first of all, it's a wild animal. So, sorry for getting fired up. When I think about this, it really worries me, because I'm afraid that this could seriously be the next step of the industry. So I want to try to get into everybody's head that this is what we need to stop. So what are we doing? Luckily, there's global efforts to try and stop. As you remember, the name of my presentation is how to ban, basically, octopus farming. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of the global efforts that are being done in the space. As Aquatic Life Institute, we engaged in this global campaign because, again, of the global issue that we see surrounding it. And we actually released the expose, so the investigation of the Mexican research facility / farm. So I highly encourage you to dive into the report a little bit more. I can share with you that we found some very unsettling findings, like the fact that the mortality rate in this farm facility is like about 50%. So again, if I were a producer, is this really the smart investment to do? And 30% of this 50% is actually due to cannibalism. So this leads back to the welfare concern I talked to you at the beginning. They are not suited to be in cramped conditions, and that's it. It's not even a profitable, if you want to look at it from the industry perspective, farming operation. In fact, over 10 years of study, no farm. This is very weird for a farmed animal. In Spain, which, again, maybe it's closer, so you might have heard of what's going on, we recently released a report which focuses more on the biosecurity risks and the public health concerns surrounding this practice. So again, there you can find, it's more of an academic report, but you can find all the different pathogens and issues and bacteria that could come up from this farm. Now, in the UK, the UK and US are actually active efforts that we're engaging with. So through the AAP, the Aquatic Animal Policy Focus Group that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are engaging with the most relevant UK institutions. I always frame it as that we're asking a follow-up from the Animal Welfare Bill. So, okay, you recognize cephalopods are sentient, so they shouldn't be farmed. Like, that's sort of the second step. And actually, just this morning, when I was reviewing my emails, we got a reply from British Veterinary Associations and the Scottish government that they will look into the issue, which, yeah, it's still promising, right? The fact that they are acknowledging that this is an issue. And in the US, in the Washington state, actually, we managed to pass a bill in the first house in this January. So now we're pushing for to bring the bill basically to the second house and eventually making it into a law for the next legislative session in 2024. In the Hawaii, as I mentioned before, the petting zoo, so some of the videos that you've seen, that farm is temporarily halted. Thanks to the amazing work of Laura Lee, Compassion, and really many individuals and organizations which are really working hard to stop this practice before it starts. And I can share with you, again, another spoiler, full of spoilers today, but we just recently found a legislator which is willing to sponsor a bill for us in the Hawaii. So I'm really hoping that will help create a momentum by establishing bans on this farming practice. So I promised that I would leave you with some practical things you can do. Everything I blah about today, you can find nice and tidy on our campaign page. So it's a octopus farming ban campaign page. My colleagues make an awesome work keeping it updated. You can find all the resources, all the information that I mentioned to you, and all the reports that I also talked about throughout my presentation. You can also find a link to the AAP, the Aquatic Animal Policy Focus Group, if you're a policy nerd like me, write to me, and I'll be happy to introduce you to this amazing group of activists around the world. If there are campaigners here, I'm sure they will agree with me that signing petition is always a great thing to do to raise awareness and just build momentum. I suggest the Avaz petition just because it's almost like 1 million signatures, so it really could have a big impact. But any petition really you find, I know there's some NGOs who are starting a campaign in their own national jurisdiction, so I encourage you to support those as well. If you just want to get introduced to octopuses, I suggest checking out the documentary like My Octopus Teacher on Netflix, which some of you might be familiar with. If you prefer books, there's also Soul of an Octopus, which is a very great book that gives you an idea of how fascinating these creatures are. Join talks like this one, but not only me speaking. Like if you go online, there's tons of interviews and webinars from even more academic folks. So if you want to hear the different points of views, we all think it's a bad idea, by the way. If you're good with social media, again, I encourage you, share, post, even just a picture of the octopus. My only request, do not post a picture of the beautiful octopus. post a picture of the tank or, a pig in a crate and say, this is what we're planning to do to this beautiful octopus. Because this is a big problem that I'm seeing in the articles that come up, when you see octopus farming, terrible idea, and then the picture is this beautiful octopus on a coral reef. And I think this really helps this detachment when then these people get into the farm and they play with the octopus and they think it's cute. That's the shift we need to make. And I know it's not easy, but if I'm not asking your help, who should I ask to? If you are not good at social media like me, but you're more into policy nerd stuff, you can write. So write position statement or even just flag this to your legislator, to your policymaker, raise the issue. Again, create momentum for this. I always forget about this, so I inserted it. If you've got an artistic flair, in our campaign page, there is a place where you can submit an artistic submission. And again, don't take this lightly, like really anything we can do to raise awareness about the issue is really fundamental to stop this practice before it even starts. So in general, just immerse yourself in the issue. However, it fits your personality. Chances are is that if you are like me, you would get fired up, and now you have some tools to do and arguments to make when people from the industry try to claim this as a sustainable and positive practice. So just to summarize, I just want to recap with you some main takeaways that hopefully I managed to pass to you throughout the presentation. We really shouldn't be making the same mistakes we've made with land-farmed animals with aquatic land-farmed animals. If you look at octopus farming, this is the exact path we're on. We shouldn't be investing our money into practices that are cheap and effective. We really should make an effort to direct investments to alternatives form of food, right? Especially in the seafood world. So even exploring cultivated meat, I think could be a better option. To governments, instead of increasing programs on aquaculture to stop overfishing, we highly encourage them to establish recovery programs for wild species. They could be done in the terms of temporary or permanent fishing bans or establishing like marine protected areas. At Aquatic Life Institute, we also advocate for a shift in a plant-based diet. First, for feed, so stepping away from farming carnivorous species, I don't even want to say step one, it's like step 0. But also we advocate for a shift in plant-based alternatives for human consumption, especially in the north, like we've seen and we're seeing here at the conference, like there's plenty of alternatives we can feed on. So I hope that by now you will agree with me that from a sustainable, environmental, and ethical point of view, octopus farming should simply not exist. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Julia, for this amazing lecture. Okay, and I want to ask some questions from the audience. So first one, you talk about some countries that want to start octopus farming, and the question is, what is the status of those farms right now?
So far, technically, an actual farm doesn't exist yet. So we know that the Canary Island was supposed to open this year, as I mentioned in the beginning. They don't have the permits. So I like to think that activists have something to do with it. The major problems is, like I said, for example, a humane slaughter method does not exist. So in order to claim that you have a sustainable farm, you need to have a humane slaughter method. I know they're researching it, but I talked to these people of the industry, the fact that they say, oh, we're researching it, to me doesn't mean that you have the answer, right? So, so far, no farm officially exists. The farm that I referred to in Mexico, as I mentioned, is a research facility from the university. So technically, they're studying the physiology and the reproductive cycle of the octopus, which they haven't managed to close. So like I'm saying, they're still fishing wild octopus, putting them in tanks and claiming that that's reproductive. So yeah, no farm exists today, proper farm. We've seen research facility, petting zoos, and very ugly attempts.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, what is the general public response to all of this? I mean, octopus farming, of course. Yeah.
That's where, and actually I was talking with Anna from Sentient Media this morning because I wanted to ask her opinion, like, how do we get people to see this link, because I feel sometimes it's obviously easier, with activists to show them what could be wrong, but it's very hard for the general public. They think, even in the Canary Island, like if you go there, like there's signs that advertise octopus meat everywhere. So this is a narrative that the industry is selling to people. And unfortunately, we know that the majority of the population falls into these narratives of octopus meat is good, it's great, and then they put things like it's great for the environment, it's great for other animals, it's great for your nutrition. So unfortunately, I think that's why I talk about octopus all the time, but I think it's really, we need to flag it to people that it's not like that. It's not going to be a good thing for the future, for a sustainable food system that we're trying to build. So to answer shortly, there is a big disconnection from how people perceive it and how it is in reality. And yeah, I wish I had an answer how to solve that, but that's another question.
Okay. And do you have any estimates on how big of a market could the octopus meat producing become if we don't act on banning it?
Yeah, so they were supposed to be selling 1 million octopuses this year. It's a terrible high number for a first farm, right? So that's the numbers we have. I think what they're planning is, again, this massive production. They're sort of, from what I understand, trying to tame these octopuses in order to have more than one in a tank. That's why these numbers are so high. So that's what I envision for now, like 1 million animals for now a year. Let's say for now in Europe.
And like, how much space does each octopus should have, like, in regulations, I should say, maybe?
I will answer the ocean. That's the space that octopus should have. But again, because it's so hard to assess, and actually high welfare octopus farming, there was a report from Eurogroup and Compassion in World Farming that said that high welfare octopus farming is just not possible. So again, it's like the thing that I always go back to. Why don't you sit with octopus producers to talk about standards? There's no, how can I say, space requirement that would fit and meet their welfare needs. So the ocean, I'll go with my first answer, actually, is the best, yeah.
I think that's a great answer, and I totally agree with you, so yeah. And how likely do you think this issue will go away on its own? Like, given that octopus farming doesn't seem like a great business due to high morality, etc.
Yeah, that's actually the thing that I don't understand from the industry. Like, these people have been trying to, and again, sorry if I always use this, like closing the breeding cycle, but it basically means breeding them in captivity, right? They haven't managed. They've been studying this animal for like 10 or 15 years. This is not a profitable thing. This is not a smart thing to do. But then, it's industry, so I don't expect them to do smart things anyways. But no, really, this is not a profitable, this is not a good investment, even if you are a producer. I mean, on top of all the concerns that I talked about, again, relying on animal production, animal prodding is really not the path we should envision in 2023 for sustainable food systems.
Okay, thank you. Also, salmons are carnivores, but are mainly fed plant-based feed in industrial production. And is that also possible for octopuses? And if so, does it have any negative welfare consequences for the carnivorous octopuses to be fed plant-based feed?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I had inserted in my presentation, then I was like, I don't want to give industry too much space. So we know that the industry is actually coming up with a plant-based feed for octopuses. I didn't dive into that because to me that's not the concern. It's not that if you give them, a plant-based diet, that solves the problems. But I have actually some concerns about it. Like, this is a carnivorous animal, just like salmon. Salmons couldn't thrive on a full plant-based diet, differently from humans, for example. So we know that there are attempts of building this plant-based feed for octopuses, and the industry is so happy about it. I really don't see that as the solution because they are carnivorous animals. So I think they should be allowed to eat what they need in the ocean by themselves.
Okay, thank you. And this will be the last question as we are kind of running out of time. But do you think we should campaign for a ban on this research or try to remove funds for this research? Sorry.
You mean the research facilities that are...
Yeah, exactly.
It's very hard when it comes to research because actually I was looking a little bit of the legislation in the EU and it's different when you have like a farmed animal or an animal used in research. Like the legislation is very different. So we know that octopuses can be used in research facilities. So I don't know exactly, how they farm them, how they use them, how they treat them, where they keep them. Advocating against research, I'm not sure it's the smartest thing to do, being an activist. And I remember like Sharon's speech this morning, she's like being focused and like being effective. Yeah, I think from our assessment, it makes more sense to try and stop farms, in like factory farms of octopuses that do not exist yet, instead of trying to, stop these research facilities which, have a lot of scientists and a lot of money behind. If the research doesn't lead to an actual, a concrete, a positive answer, that's it. Like the farm it's not sustainable and cannot be done.
Okay, thank you so much. And this was our last question. So I want to once again thank you so much for this amazing lecture.
Thank you everyone for listening.
I think we all learned so much and it was very, very interesting.
Thank
you. And I also want to thank all the attendees for coming here today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.